So, as some of you may know, I've been loud and vocal about the fact that I thought this election was not a wave election. The first piece that I wrote about how there was a decoupling between the Biden approval rating and the congressional generic was in November of last year, where I wrote that I thought this was not going to be a typical midterm. And then in May and June, I started seeing a lot of polling showing that this was not a red wave. This is, before Roe ended. And so I've definitely been out there arguing that this was just going to be a competitive election and not a wave election. And that's what we're in. We're in a very competitive election. And I'd rather be us than them at this point. And let me tell you why. So first of all, I just want to put this out there that, we have a new election system in this country. I think people kind of take this for granted now, but there are many states where early voting in various forms is much easier than it used to be. We need to create more awareness about the importance of voting early, not just voting. It makes the elections run smoother. It makes it harder for the shenanigans Republicans play to on election day to impact the election. Easier to count votes, all that stuff, right? Second is that, as all of you know from campaigns, that if high propensity voters in a midterm all vote early, they come off the GOTV list, meaning that campaigns can move down to second and tertiary targets. That actually just makes more Democratic voters. It increases turnout. And then also, I think in a midterm, what's really important is that it puts this sort of peer pressure on people, because we start getting all this data showing that, oh my God, all these people are voting. Isn't that amazing? And then for a marginal voter who's not really sure if they're going to vote or not, they can see all these people voting. Hey, I got to go vote. That is much more important for us than for them. We have more Democratic voters in the country, but we have a higher percentage of episodic and new and irregular voters. So this sense that, hey, everybody's voting is more important for us than them. So it's really important as a matter of just us starting to really put greater emphasis on early voting and to have communicate about this to our communities across the country. I think here we go into the election analysis now. That, look, we are in an amazing place right now. No one thought we had a shot here. It's an incredible achievement, right? The anti-MAGA majority that drove the Republicans from power, can they show up again and prevent them from coming back into power? Our candidates have lots of money due to our fired up grassroots. And, we should just be, right now, we should be relentlessly glass half full. This is an amazing achievement that we're in this thing. And now we got to close strong. And as I said earlier, this was never going to be a typical midterm. Once the Republicans chose after January 6th to run towards MAGA, the politics that had been rejected twice by the country in overwhelming numbers, it was unlikely to be a traditional midterm, because it meant that voters were going to have to now vote for Republicans after having rejected them twice. And just the dynamic of that was always more difficult than people understood. And so as I mentioned, I started writing about this in November of last year. And just as a reminder of what's happened in the last few elections, people may not really realize this, but since Trump became the nominee, the Republicans have only averaged 46% of the vote. I mean, MAGA is not popular. It's not a successful, political formula for them. And in the last two elections, we've won by 6.5 points, which is really kind of incredible. And so the math in this election was actually always going to be harder for them than for us. I mean, they had to make up a lot of ground here, and it's not clear that they are right now. And so then we know what happened, right? In the spring and summer and the fall, two very important dynamics emerged in this race. One is that all the anti-MAGA majority was reminded about why they had voted against MAGA twice. And the Republicans, the extremism of the Republican Party and their criminality and malevolence is just in our face every day. And then the other thing that's important is that Biden closed really strong, right? I mean, this was a very strong closing. The economy has continued to grow. Yes, inflation is too high, but the economy has been, growing steadily, right? And we've seen, the war in Ukraine is going well. His approval now today, and I'll get into this, his approval rating this morning is the highest of 2022. And so he's continuing to rise. And so, we've had this two dynamics where MAGA, the ugliness of MAGA couldn't be avoided, and also we closed strong. And that's what's created where we are today. Where there was a lot of evidence that this was going to be a better election than we understood is what happened in these House special elections, right? We've had 5 House specials since Roe ended. And we overperformed our 2020 numbers by 7 points on average in these races. In New York 19, I spoke to the DCCC in the afternoon of that election, and they told me they were going to lose by 3 to 4 points, and they were okay with that. And we ended up winning by 2.5. So in the actual voting that's taken place, which is more important than polls, we have dramatically overperformed expectations and even overperformed 2020, the year that we won by 4.5 points nationally. And we know that in Kansas, it was even more extreme. More people, more Democrats voted in Kansas in that primary than Republicans did, which is almost statistically impossible, right? I mean, if somebody had created this slide, they would have been laughed, beforehand, they would have been laughed out of town. And so incredible energy and, that we've seen in the electorate, right? Our voters are voting in much higher numbers than people expected, and frankly, much higher numbers than polls suggested, which means that if there's a hidden vote this election, it may be our vote and not their vote, right? I mean, this is important. This is a slide that Tom Bonier has been doing great work on this, who's been doing the best research on what he calls the women's surge into the electorate. Not only have we seen women vote in very high numbers in those elections, but the voter registration, this is the change in gender, voter registration in states before Roe and after Roe, and June 24th in 2020 and June 24th in 2022. And if you see the orange, right, the orange shows there was no pattern in 2020, right? Some states more women voted after, some states men. Look at the pattern, the blue, right? This is a clear pattern, right? And that in states, battleground states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, women, the electorate is going through extraordinary change right now. Women are registering in much, much higher numbers, and it's being driven largely by young women, right? Women of childbearing age who are more affected by the potential abortion restrictions than anyone else. And this, I just want to say, I just pulled this morning, and what's amazing is that if you look at 538 and the congressional generic, which is, are you going to vote Democrat or Republican for Congress? Every poll taken in the last 2 weeks, with the exception of 2 highly Republican polls, Rasmussen and Trafalgar, has us ahead in the generic. And CNN today had us ahead 3 points among likely voters. A Republican polling operation, Public Opinion Strategies, had us up 2. Navigator had us up 6 this week, right? The conventional wisdom is that we need to be up 2 to 3 to keep the House, to make the House competitive. Well, we're there. I mean, this is the snapshot of where we are, right? And, this is a lot of polls, and only one of these is a Democratic polling, right? The most of these are independent polls. So, this is where we want to be. We could use another point or two, but, what this suggests is that the election's very competitive. This is Biden's, somehow I forgot to update this. I apologize. I was going to show you a really cool number, which is that he's at 46 today, and apologize. This is from a couple of days ago. And so he's at his highest approval of 2022 today. And he is, each week he's been sort of going up a point. The conventional wisdom is that we need him at 45, 46 to be competitive. He's basically there. But again, we need another point or two in order to do what we want to do in this election. We're not out of the woods here. The Senate map got very good for us in the last couple of weeks, right? This is Democratic leads in the Senate outside the margin of error. Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Washington. We have sturdy, durable leads in all these states. Some of them tightened up a little bit, but it's just a little bit less of a lot more. There's still a lot more, right? Florida looks like it's slipping away from us. And then North Carolina, Nevada, Ohio, Wisconsin are dead toss-ups. We have to be a little concerned with some of the polling in Wisconsin. There's been a couple polls showing, bigger outside of the margin for Johnson. My own view is that Johnson's negatives are so high that I just don't think he can put this race away. And so we've got to, I think this will go down to the wire. And it's such an important state that we can't give up on that no matter what. There is a lot of buzz about North Carolina right now. I'll say also there's been a lot of consistently good polling there, and people should feel good that we have an opportunity there. So look, if we just win this top line here, right, we keep the Senate. And then the question is, if every seat we win in this bottom in the toss-ups, we add a seat to the Senate. And so, we're in good shape here. I mean, the Senate clearly leans Democrat today, right? And the House is actually, I think, more competitive than is the conventional wisdom. Fox, in their last poll, in their modeling, had us keeping the House. This is Fox News. Imagine they wrote about this on their website. I don't even know how they got through the editor at Fox. The Economist has us at 214 seats in their latest modeling. 538 has us a 36% chance. It was 40% yesterday. Who knows why it changed, given that all the polling's been really good. And then, Nate Cohn from the Times, who's a contrarian and a challenging guy, wrote this whole piece last week about how the House, really could be in play. I mean, this is what he wrote, right? This, the New York Times analyst saying, yeah, I mean, House could go, right? I think the House is in play, and I think people who wrote the House off did so prematurely. Remember all these dynamics about bad candidates and crazy Republicans and them not having enough money and all this stuff. This is all playing out in the House too. It's the same election. I mean, this is one MAGA party. There's not a MAGA party in the Senate and a good party in the House. It's all the same people with the same problems, right? The other thing that I just think hasn't gotten enough attention, and I think this is kind of an interesting New Deal leaders issue, is what's happening with the Republican Party. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this than I normally do in these presentations, because I think it's relevant to what your work, which is that we're seeing something that is unprecedented happen, which is that there is now really two Republican parties. There's the MAGA party, and then there's this other thing, which has no home. It's the homeless Republicans. And the homeless Republicans have become, organized and powerful now. We used to call them never Trumpers. And if we were in a parliamentary democracy, there would have been, the Republicans would have split into two. There would have been a MAGA far right party, and then there would have been this sort of center right conservative party that would have had, let's say, 7 or 8%, and they would have folded into the Democratic coalition, and we would have made Liz Cheney a cabinet official, and there would have been a mechanism for us to absorb all these people. But our system doesn't really allow that, right? We don't really have a mechanism. And I just want to encourage New Deal leaders to be thinking about how we can create a welcome mat for these Republicans who don't really have a home anymore. I mean, I use this analogy that for many of these folks, like Bill Kristol and others, they're now like refugees who've left a country, and now they realize they're never going to be able to go home again. And they've got to make home where they are. And we've got to do what we can to make them feel welcome in our family. I'm hosting Bill Kristol next week for a podcast. And, I encourage in every state where you are, there should be some kind of formal mechanism to thank and to welcome the Republicans who've broken ranks. And it's happening all over the country. I mean, Gretchen Whitmer got endorsed by 150 Republicans. I'm here in Nevada. Cortez Masto has been endorsed by huge numbers of Republicans here who are scared of Laxalt. And there are two things driving the split. It was originally MAGA, extremism, election denialism, but it's also now becoming abortion, right? There are pro-choice Republicans now who are leaving the Republican Party because of the abortion restrictions and the extremism on abortion. So we have an opportunity to grow our coalition. And I will tell you the impact of this, even if all of this work, Bill Kristol spending $10 million telling Republicans not to vote Republican, even if this affects 1% of the vote, this could be the difference between us winning and losing both chambers. So this is a really significant new development that could be with us for a long time. I think you have an important role to play in the coming years to make these folks feel welcome as part of our broad coalition. Invite them over to dinner, have them sup at your table, let them drink your wine, all those things, right? Hispanics, this is this narrative. If you can mute everybody, that'd be great. Hello. So Hispanics, I'm going to talk about this briefly. This is something I'm happy to have a Q&A about. The national narrative about the Hispanic vote is just wrong. The national narrative about the election was wrong. It's also wrong about this. The Democrats in 2020 had our best year that we've ever had in the Southwest. In the heavily Mexican-American parts of the country, Democrats are performing at the highest levels that we've ever performed at across the board. And we're not in Florida, but there's a big country outside of Florida. And in the rest of the country, we're doing really, really well. Right now, in 2020, we won, let me give you the stats on this. In 2004, George Bush won Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico. They controlled 5 out of 8 Senate seats and 14 out of 21 House seats. Today, we won all 4 of those states at the presidential level for the first time in 80 years. We control all 8 Senate seats, and now we have 14 House seats. And so we've gained 7 seats in the House, 5 in the Senate, and we won all 4 at the presidential level, first time in 80 years. It's the best performance we've had in the Southwest, and the gains that we've made there are the things that have given us the majority in both chambers. This is amazing success. This isn't decline or erosion. It's amazing achievement collectively by the family. And this year, if you look at the statewide races and adding Texas and California, we're running above our recent elections in Arizona, California, Colorado, and Texas. We're, in New Mexico, we'll win handily, not with as big a margin as 2018. And in Nevada, I think we're going to win by 2 to 3 points. And so in the Southwest and in the heavily Mexican-American parts of the country, we're actually doing better in this election than we were doing in recent elections. And this may be the best showing for us in this region ever in this election. This is the opposite of erosion, right? This is gains, progress, strength, and we have to redo this narrative. If you look at the recent polling among Hispanics, also, Republicans are struggling to match Trump's numbers. And so, I'm going to be doing a big presentation on this next week. If you're interested, come to my website, you can sign up. But I'm going to make a major effort now to try to change the national narrative on the Hispanic vote, because it's wrong, and we should feel good about what's going on here. So here we are, right? We know that the most powerful force in the election today is not disappointment in Democrats and Joe Biden and fear of inflation. It's MAGA. And it's the fear of MAGA. It's what's driving this election. It's why our numbers look as good as they do. It's what drove the last 2 elections, and I think it's going to be the driving force in this one too. But remember, like every election, it's the economy stupid, and we have to do a better job at closing on the economy. I think we've ceded the economic conversation to the Republicans this year in a very dangerous way. I'm worried about this. This is my big fear about the election. And I just want to make a plea to everyone here today that we need, as a family, to make a commitment to win the economic argument with the Republicans. We trail Republicans now by 10 to 15 points on the economy. That is not a number where we can get done what we need to get done and be competitive and have the kind of elections we want. We've got to close the gap here. We've got to establish this fundamental contrast that under Democrats, we see jobs and growth, and under Republicans, you see recessions and decline. And let me just go through a couple slides on this, right? This is, the economic data since 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell and a new age of globalization began. 18 years of 16 years of Republicans, 18 years of Democrats. And Joe Biden, for example, has created 10 million jobs. That's 5 times as many jobs as the last 3 Republican presidents combined, right? We shouldn't be losing the economic argument to these guys. When you look at GDP growth, but Biden is 3 times ahead of Trump, way ahead of both Bushes, and it's come down a little bit, but it's still way above, recent norms. And to me, this is the most important slide, that since 1989, there have been 46 million jobs created in America. 44 million have been created under Democratic presidents. 96%, basically all the jobs created in America over the last generation have been created under presidents. The Republicans have not done their part to move the country forward. We should not be losing the economic argument to these guys by 10 to 15 points. And particularly when you go into the guts of the Biden achievements. And yes, inflation's too high, but all these other things have happened too. And we have to be able to say both. It's about we did good and inflation's too high. It's not we did good, but inflation's too high. It's and. The but doesn't negate all of the other things that came before. And what we're seeing now is poverty rates, uninsured rates, unemployment rates are near or record lows. Wage gains still are significant, just below inflation, by the way. New business starts, one of the most encouraging things, are at record levels, right? The deficit, 3rd consecutive Democratic president to bring the deficit way down. You all know this story, right? Deb does a lot of work in promoting all this. Amazing economic achievement given what happened when Biden came into office. We can tout these achievements and say we're working on inflation. And I think, I'll be honest, I think one of the mistakes we made is we've talked about inflation too much. We made the Republican argument against us for them. We should have been talking more about these accomplishments and these achievements and talking about inflation. I think that we took the bait a little bit here as a party, and it may cost us in this election. But the bottom line is, despite all of that, right, we've got a shot. We need to leave it all on the playing field now. We need to be more proud of our president and our party for all the amazing things that we've done. 96% of all jobs created since 1989 under our watch. And imagine, by the way, we've only held total power in Washington for 6 out of the last 42 years, right? And it's the first 2 years, the last 3 Democratic presidents. look at all that we just got done. Imagine if we have 2 more years. And so not only be motivated by the fear of MAGA and their extremism, be motivated by the opportunity that we have, that if we win these federal elections and win the midterms, right, not only will we see gains in the states, but we have 2 more years of progress under a president who knows how to legislate, right? We've just learned that over the last 2 years. And if anything, by the way, again, if there's any final reminder I can give you about why this all matters, is that we just can't allow these people to be put in charge of this chamber that they attacked just less than 2 years ago. It would be a tragedy for the country. They have not renounced this kind of activity, right? There's this clear and present danger to our republic. And, it's why we have no choice other than to win the midterms and do everything we can to leave it all on the playing field. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Good luck in all the work that you're doing and all the important work you're doing.